Matthew, everyday audiophile, music lover, and beer enthusiast. Now, it's 20 minutes until noon, so I'm going to hold off on the beer today. But after releasing yesterday's video, I really feel like it deserved a follow-up because there was a lot of information that I wanted to talk about, how the speaker was built, more information about the inside of it, the technologies that are used. But in the interest of keeping the video to a 20-minute-ish length, I had to cut out a lot of content. I recorded over an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes, and cutting that down to 20 minutes it's not that easy. So let's talk about it. First, one of the things that I left out in the original video was the price of the speaker, and this was very deliberate on my part. It wasn't to give a false impression to anyone that's watching it. It's because I wanted to purely judge the speaker on its technical capabilities and not necessarily make it a value proposition. Now, I do think that it is a great speaker for the price and you get a lot for your money. But keep in mind that it is still expensive. That cost does come in at around 14 grand, including the stands. So very expensive considering the drivers that are used. And that's nothing against PureArtFi drivers. It's just that there's a lot of competition using that same 6.5-inch driver, right? You have the Burkhardt Audio E50. I think Lingdorf makes a speaker, their Q100. March Audio has a speaker that uses it. Radiant Acoustics Clarity 6.2 has been reviewed by a bunch of sites recently. And then Robson Acoustics over in the UK also have a score of speakers that use PureArtFi woofers. Now, the interesting thing about all of these options is that they are considerably less than the 14 grand asking price of the PureArtFi LS-6. The interesting thing about all of these other options that I listed is that they come in at less than half the price of the PureArtFi LS-6. The E50 is what, $4,200 a pair. March Audio's $41. Radiant Clarity 6.2 is $4 grand. All of these are coming in that $4 to $6 grand region, except for maybe Robson. They have options that are in the 5 figures. So then the question, if you're looking at it from a value proposition, is where does that extra 10 grand come from? And it's a really, really good question. In order to explain that, let's take a closer look at what the speaker is and everything that is, all the technologies that have been implemented inside of it that you don't necessarily see. Because I think that's where all of the performance, the hidden value of the speaker is really coming from. First, let's start with the enclosure itself. You can't really tell by looking from the front or sides of it, but the enclosure panels are about 1.25 inch thick. That's 25 millimeters for my metric folks over there. And the front baffle itself is about 1.5 inches thick. It's solid walnut here, though the beauty of being this boutique brand is that you can get any wood that you want anywhere on the speaker. So if you want a different hardwood on the front or you want different woods on the side, that's entirely up to you. The limit in this case is your imagination. And these aren't simple veneers that they're ordering. These are shop sewn, custom cut veneers that they're putting on their loudspeakers. Additionally, just like Q Acoustics, they use a sort of non-setting gel between the layers of their enclosure that absorbs vibration and turns it to heat. Therefore, that results in a cabinet that has very little resonance. It does not vibrate much compared to a traditional speaker like my Riga RS10s that are actually sitting right here. And while we're on the topic of resonance control, vibration control, really this is one of the most important overlooked aspects of speaker design. You can't just have an enclosure. You have to have an enclosure that is properly braced, properly damped, so that the vibrations on the back side of the driver don't cause the enclosure itself to vibrate, because those vibrations cause noise, and you can hear that noise in a well set up room. Once you've heard it, you can't unhear it, unfortunately. And that's why people like Ron of New Record Day prefer open baffle speakers, is because it does away with those resonances. It's also why Danny Ritchie of GR Research has open baffle speakers. And I call out Danny Ritchie here because he also had a hand in this speaker. For those with an eagle eye, they may see that the tweeter on this LS6 looks awfully familiar. And it does. It's the same tweeter that Danny uses in his Exotica speakers, and that's for very good reason. It performs well with a waveguide, and it's not only easy to integrate with the high-performing PureArtFi woofer, but it matches its sound signature. And that's really important to me. Circling back to vibration control though, in addition to having these non-setting glues, these non-setting gels between the individual layers of the cabinet, there's also a limp mass dampening element, I guess you could call it, inside. These are 15 pounds of like a kiln dried sand, and its whole purpose is to absorb vibrations and turn it to heat. So it's just one of the other technologies that Norman Tracy at PureArtFi is using to help control vibrations. And in my talking with them, he said that as they've added more pounds, they started with 5 pounds, move up to 10, and now 15 of this mass dampening element that's inside the speaker. Every time they did that, they increased the mass of the speaker. The sound only improved. Another thing that they're doing inside of the speaker, which to be honest, I've never seen in any other design internally, is that it isn't a 90-degree flat box inside of the whole thing. In fact, there are no 90-degree angles inside of this enclosure. And the theory behind this is that you have sound waves that are bouncing back and forth and around this cabinet. By eliminating all of these 90-degree square angles, the enclosure essentially becomes an infinite enclosure as far as sound waves are concerned. So they're not bouncing back and forth, creating constructive and deconstructive vibrations. They go around until they dissipate entirely by either being absorbed by, again, that non-setting gel or that limp mass damping that's inside of the cabinet. And so when we move over to the crossover side, again, I said Danny Ritchie, he had a hand in this. He designed the crossover. The crossover uses the same high-performance parts that he always encourages and sells on his website. But additionally, the crossover is potted in epoxy, and that is in its own enclosure inside of the cabinet so that it is protected from the vibrations of the drivers. When you ask Norman, the micro vibrations that you get from these drivers do affect the crossover. You can hear it. And that's why when you look at GR Research crossovers, they're usually in a part of the cabinet that is unlikely to see those vibrations. It's something that you can hear. In doing my research, I came across a single paragraph that I think really nicely wraps up this loudspeaker as far as design goals and value proposition is concerned. Keeping in mind, it is 14 grand for the entire package. And it goes as such. This loudspeaker represents a synthesis of two distinct yet convergent philosophies: the objective, science-driven pursuit of sonic purity and the subjective, artistic expression of bespoke craftsmanship. It is explicitly positioned as a fine furniture object that houses state-of-the-art hi-fi, a product intended for discerning homes where both aesthetic harmony and musical fidelity are paramount. This dual identity is not a marketing conceit, but the fundamental principle of its design. Yes, I agree with it entirely. You do get state-of-the-art components, state-of-the-art crossover, state-of-the-art technologies in reducing vibrations. It is a very inert cabinet. I cannot get that across enough how much that matters in speaker design. And additionally, you get to design the speaker however you want. If you look at the pictures, you'll notice that the binding posts are at the bottom of the speaker stand, and that's because speaker wire runs up through the center of the speaker stand into a speak-on connection on the bottom of the speaker. There's a faceplate on the back of the speaker that says PureArtFi. If you wanted, you could have the binding post there instead. Really, the world is yours when you're designing the speaker, and I think that bespoke, beautiful craftsmanship that you get is worth the cost, to me at least, because I think they're some of the most beautiful speakers that I've seen. I love the look of wood. I'm not a huge fan of Magico and Rockport speakers. I like my wood. What can I say? So with that, where do we go from here? I think the next logical step is to look at some of the already well-reviewed PureArtFi speakers. I think Burkhardt is probably at the top of my list with the E50, mainly because it shares a lot of the design goals of the LS6. Now, I've seen the inside of it. I don't think it's as technologically advanced as the LS6, but I do look forward to hearing it, and I'm hoping to have it in at some point in the future. So I hope that answered a lot of the questions that some people had from yesterday. Again, I'm sorry for not including them in yesterday's video. I just didn't want to put out a video that was 45 minutes long because to me that is a bit of a drag to listen to the whole thing. 15 to 20 minutes is my preferred length, and I'd much rather break that into 2 segments instead of having one really long video. But until then, I will see y'all next time.